Welcome back to the Reading and Writing Podcast. My guest today is Rob Rufus, author of the new novel Paradise, West Virginia. Rob, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, sure. Well, if someone hasn't yet heard about your new novel, Paradise, West Virginia, how would you describe the novel?
I would describe it as a thriller. I'd say a thriller mystery with a little social commentary thrown in. It's about the children of a convicted serial killer who use the event. A podcast comes to town to do a show on their dad, and the girl goes missing at the podcast taping, and they try to use this as a springboard to prove their dad's innocence.
Do you remember the original idea or impetus that led you to write Paradise, West Virginia?
Yeah, I do actually. I was looking for something to watch on Netflix, and they had like 3 or 4 things about Ted Bundy, and that was what they were really pushing. Like it was, the autoplay trailers, and I just kind of went, who's making money off this? Like, he had a daughter who was a victim in and of herself, really, and I know she's not getting royalties off all that Ted Bundy stuff. But somebody's making millions of dollars off this horrible, heartbreakingly gruesome things this guy did, and it really had me thinking about, the children of convicted killers, and actually when I was in a kid in school, there were these 2 brothers whose dad was in jail for murder, and got out eventually. He got exonerated, and I couldn't imagine, what all that was like, and I think the combination of the 2 things really is what started the idea of snowballing. I decided I really wanted to write about the kids of somebody like that, and kind of put an empathetic lens on that.
Gotcha. I know that you write about the opioid epidemic. What led you to in the novel? What led you to including that or writing about it?
Well, I'm from Huntington, West Virginia, which is the overdose capital of the world, as CNN calls it, and I've had the opioid epidemic really has affected my life in a lot of ways. I mean, I've had a lot of friends die, a lot of friends get hooked on that stuff. A lot of, I was just back in my hometown a couple weeks ago, and it was really broke my heart to see the devastation of that. And I'd watched a documentary about this serial killer called the Grim Sleeper that was active in Los Angeles in the 1980s at the height of the crack epidemic. And he really preyed on addicts. And because the police were so overwhelmed by the epidemic, any person with a drug pop that they found dead, they kind of just assumed it was drugs and wrote it off. And I was watching that going, that could just as easily happen in West Virginia now, in Appalachia. And so I really wanted to incorporate that and use that as a way of talking about those issues, and bringing them to light. I mean, like I'm just uniquely suited to talk about that stuff, and and it was important for me to do that.
Sure.
When I said it there.
Well, I'm curious, what was your initial writing journey that led you to writing and getting your memoir, Die Young with Me, published?
I just knew that, I mean, in my most of my 20s, I just spent touring in punk rock bands. That's all I did. We'd be on tour, 6, 8 months out of the year, playing everywhere from basements to like big festivals in Europe to whatever. And it was a weird thing because, so for your listeners that don't know, like I'm a cancer survivor. I had got diagnosed with stage 4 cancer when I was 17 and
Wow.
spent the next few years in the hospital. And then, so when I was in my 20s, my mid 20s, and I was traveling and playing music, I really got to the point I quit even talking to people about that because, I just didn't feel like it's such an awkward thing, and people are very awkward about talking about, mortality. And so it would often be like I would say something about it to someone and they go, "Oh man, that sucks. Anyway, where do you want to go eat?" or whatever. And and I get it to an extent, like, uh, but I knew I had a really, I knew I had a story to tell, and I mean, as egomaniacal as that may be, um, and you, I had no real training with writing, so I just for the next 5 or 6 years on the road really started, hammering out the what would be the initial manuscript of that, which was like 800 pages and looked like a suicide bomber's manifesto or something like. Uh, and I printed it. I remember printing it off at Kinko's, and they looked at me like I was a crazy person. Um, but I ended up whittling it down, and then I set about finding a book agent the same way I used to try to find. Same way I used to send demos to record labels when I was a teenager. Like I just went through all the books I loved, wrote down the authors' names, found who their agents were, sent the manuscript out to like 200 agents, and didn't expect to hear back from any. And I heard back from a couple, and and then it ended up getting picked up by Simon and Schuster. So I got really really fortunate with that.
That's great. Had you always wanted to write novels, or was that just a transition from you after you wrote this, as you said, this sprawling memoir?
Yeah, I always dug authors that I like that when authors kind of write a lot of different styles of that. I mean, that hasn't been very helpful for my own career because everything I write is like a little different. It's not all the same genre. It's not all the same whatever. But yeah, when I got the memoir published, which really I just came at it as I came at music. Like I'm just a huge fan. I was a huge fan of books. When you spend that much time in the hospital, books are definitely your friend. And when I realized I could write, when I got that validation via a publisher, I really wanted to try my hand at fiction, and I also got into like screenwriting and things like that. And I came at it a little late. Like I was in my early 30s when Die Young with Me was published, so I was like just wanted to strike while the iron was lukewarm.
Thank you for listening to the Reading and Writing podcast. We'll rejoin the interview with Robert Rufus after this message.
The Writer's Toolkit Podcast with Paul Kalburgi. In the first season, I sit down with veteran Hollywood screenwriters and playwrights working in the West End and on Broadway. I find out how and where they like to work and the writing journeys behind some of their best-known works. So if you write for stage or screen, join us for inspiring conversations about the writing life, as well as tips and ideas for maintaining a healthy writing practice.
The Writer's Toolkit Podcast.
Sure. So what were these bands that you were playing in where you were doing all of this touring in your 20s?
I had a punk band called Blacklist Royals that was my brother and I's band, and we're actually about to do a 10th anniversary reunion on Halloween next month, and I'm looking forward to that. And I still play professionally, and I have a band called the Bat Signs now that I play drums in, and we're doing a lot of cool stuff. But so it's been great to have both creative outlets, you know.
Sure. So what was your writing process when you were working on Paradise, West Virginia? Did you do any outlining or structure, or did you just kind of dive into the narrative and see where the story kind of took you?
You know, with Paradise, I actually went about it different than I had my previous two books. Like, I used to do kind of what you just mentioned. I would have a general idea of where I wanted the story to go, and then I would just start writing and go where it took me and put the pieces together as I went. With Paradise, I tried to be more thoughtful about it. You know, I didn't go to school for creative writing or anything like that. And I actually had lunch with another great author friend of mine, Christian Russell, whose book Sky for Us Alone is fucking fantastic. And she was telling me about an outlining book called The Story Grid, and how much it had helped her. And so I got it, and I was like, oh man, this like makes sense to like maybe, you know, outline the book I'm writing. And so I really went, I'm going to take this guy's advice, and I'm going to do it exactly like this book says, which was basically write, you know, have a 5-scene, almost like instead of a 3-act structure, it would be a 5-act structure. Mm-hmm. And then within those 5 acts, there's 5 more acts. And then within those scenes, there's 5 parts to each scene. And with every conversation, it's basically like if there's not an arc going on in every part of this, then it's getting you off track. And Paradise was also the first book that I wrote that was in third person and had, you know, dual narratives going on. So mm-hmm. Outlining was really instrumental. And now that's how I write everything, be it a screenplay or even like a letter, you know, or like I'm doing a writing workshop and trying to figure that out. It's like anything I write, I'm really, for better or for worse, going by this guy's method. It really changed my game, and it really sped up the process. I mean, like my first book took 5 or 6 years to write. My second book took about 2 years, and my third book that I really consciously outlined took me like 8 months or something. So it really, it was really super helpful for me.
That's great. Are you working on another novel now?
Yeah, I'm, I have some TV stuff going on, and, Paradise has actually, got optioned by, Paramount to be a TV show. So that's been really exciting. And
that's great.
And I have some pilots and things like that floating around, and I am kicking around with the new book. I haven't made a lot of progress on it yet, but it's been weird going from the screenwriting mode to a novel mode, because it's just so, I never really realized how different it was until I started diving back into it. I hadn't written anything but screenplays or TV treatments and stuff for the past year or two. So trying to work on another novel was, I almost had to start from scratch and really, go through authors that I loved that really inspired me and read their stuff really critically to just try to get the rhythm back in my head. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. I'm curious, what writing advice would you offer for those who are working on their own stories and novels?
What's been super helpful to me is, and just like with the memoir and the novel thing, like I with screenwriting and all that stuff, I kind of just, I take from all of it, I can kind of consider it all the same thing in my mind. And so a lot of the stuff that's informed my literary writing, I've gotten from screenwriting. And one thing that's been really helpful is the idea of log lines, which basically is an elevator pitch, which, in the screenwriting world, like, ideas get bought just by a 3 sentence pitch,
Right.
and I've really, anytime I have an idea, like I have a little idea notebook and I'll write down any crazy idea I have. And, but it really helps clarify, like, what is the story you're trying to tell? Why is the story different than us other stories? And like, what is the tone you're trying to set, and so I really encourage, if I was to give advice when you're just in the initial stages of coming up with an idea, that has been really helpful to me to really clarify, like, which of my ideas, I have tons of ideas. And then I go, if I do that, it really helps me clarify which of my ideas have legs and which, don't,
Sure.
which might be like kind of a part of something different or whatever. Like, I always keep this stuff on the back burner, but that's really helped inform my writing and what I prioritize as far as projects I'm going to work on next.
Sure. Well, what novels or nonfiction books have you read recently that you enjoyed?
I read this book, Burning the Days by James Sallis. That was the first nonfiction book I'd read in a minute. And it was cool. This guy had a really incredible life, and I actually just reread On Writing by Stephen King, just because I was trying to get myself back in the headspace. And it's funny because I would always say, like, when I'm writing, I don't really read a lot. But I've kind of been doing the opposite lately. I've been reading a lot. I mean, novels mostly. I've really been reading novels that either I've read before or that I'm familiar enough with the story that I can focus on the writing and the layout and the craft of it as I read, and read it really critically instead of, following the narrative as much. And that's been super helpful too.
That's great. Well, where can people find you online if they'd like to learn more about you and your novels and your memoir?
I'm on, rubrufus.net. I believe is my website, and I'm on, Instagram and Twitter, unfortunately. And, and yeah, my books, you can pretty much pick up
Sure.
anywhere. And all my stuff links to, the different projects I have going on, both musically and books and TV wise.
Great. Well, again, we've been speaking with Rob Rufus, author of the new novel, Paradise, West Virginia. The novel is on sale now, so go buy a copy. And Rob, thanks for doing this interview.
Thank you so much, really.
Thanks a lot.
Everyone loves shopping online. Well, I'm going to tell you what I tell my golf buddies when they buy clubs. Stop searching for coupon codes. Download Capital One Shopping to your computer. Capital One Shopping instantly searches for available coupon codes and automatically applies them at checkout. Plus, it's free, and you don't even need a Capital One card to use it. That's like hitting a hole-in-one without even trying. Capital One Shopping. It's kind of genius. What's in your wallet?
Savings and available coupons vary.
Progressive presents Forced Metaphors about bundling your home and auto.
In sports, 3 goals is a hat trick. And when you bundle your home and auto with Progressive, you get a hat trick of great savings and round-the-clock protection. So you might be thinking, wait, that's 2 things. A hat trick is 3. But in this metaphor, great savings counts as 2 goals, and so does round-the-clock protection. So it's like 4 goals, and that's more than 3. It's basic math.
Forced Metaphors.
Presented by Progressive. Bundle and protect today. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Discount not available in all states or situations.